Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are live on the Play to the Plan station. This is Sloth, the Buckethead, coming at you. Today we're going to have a special little dual episode of Solo, and also a review of the current Bad Batch episode that just came out last Friday. So, stay tuned and should have some good content for you today. So if you guys don't mind, I'm going to take my ceremonial first rip here. Actually, a little unprepared. I didn't pack my bowl yet, so just give me one quick second. But yeah, definitely, Darth's excited for it. You can see him trying to choke me out here. Ready to see the up-and-coming young Han and what threat he could potentially pose. So yeah, should be some good content here. And toke away. Cheers. Alright, so yeah, we'll kick this one off today with Solo. Try to keep it a little bit in the order of which things came out here. So basically, this is set in between movies 3 and 4. It's a pretty chaotic time period, I would say, in the galaxy. A lawless time where the Imperial Empire is trying to hold things together and trying to maintain order, but they're, struggling at a sense at the same, because there's no defined, really, leadership. There's a bunch of different crime syndicates and different outlaw groups that are rebelling and, trying to make their money and not really allying with the Imperial Republic. So it's a pretty chaotic time. We learned that one of the biggest groups currently is called the Crimson Dawn, who a huge leader of the Sith, we will find out towards the end of the movie, is actually the head of. I wish he actually played a bigger role in this movie, because it would have made it a little bit more enjoyable for me, but, can't win them all. So, yeah, the movie starts out, you have an intro scene of Han, and you get like a nice little dice shot from the dice that everybody knows that was hanging in the Millennium Falcon. I guess it's sort of his good luck charm. So yeah, basically it's shot at a young Han, and you get to introduce to his young little lover. Her name is Kira, and the actor is, I believe, Emilia Clarke. Everybody knows her mostly from Game of Thrones. Very attractive woman. Definitely one of my celebrity crushes, you could say. So yeah, but definitely makes it a little more enjoyable. So yeah, you could definitely see Han and Kira. They grew up on this planet called Corellia, which is a shipbuilding slave planet. So they did not really have a great life growing up. It is, work all day, not really any fun. But, Han, he seems to fit it in when he can. That guy's all over the place. Even though he's technically a slave, he still does what he wants. Yeah, you can never keep that man down too long. So, we learned that Han and Kira want to get off the planet Corellia just to, start their own life so they don't have to take orders from other people. Han has this brilliant idea of stealing a vial of coaxium, which is refined hyperfuel. And also, that was one of the biggest, I would say, resources that a lot of these like crime syndicates and other mob bosses and a lot of bounty hunters were chasing after, because this was the haul at the time. No other price could beat this, and you were set for life if you could get your hands on some refined coaxium. But it was very dangerous to pursue, because I believe if it went over 35 degrees Fahrenheit, it would explode. So that obviously posed a huge threat, and it has to be transported very, very quickly. Just a little brief background of coaxium, because that will play a huge role in this movie, as you guys will see. So, Yeah, basically Han and Kira have a plan, and they steal I believe it's $500 to $600 or credits worth of coaxium, and they are planning on boarding a transport or trying to bribe their way out of Corellia, because obviously they're slaves, so they can't really leave. Yeah, they have a rough little go at it. They get caught by one of these huge, I forget what they call. I think his clans are called the Grey Worms or something. His name is, or White Worms, sorry. This kind of hideous-looking creature called Moloch. Here, let me get up the droid cam here. Yeah, so Moloch is, I guess it's kind of hard to say what kind of role he plays or what position he is, but he is like a bounty hunter or some kind of assistant to this giant worm creature called Lady Proxima, who I guess enslaves everybody on Corellia, or I guess is technically Han's owner and Kira's owner. So Moloch was not having it when, they were trying to leave, and he was tasked with the duty of hunting them down. There's a big speeder chase as they're trying to get to the airport or transport field, whatever you want to call it. And, Moloch pull off some moves. He gives them a run for their money a little bit. He had a pretty fast speeder himself, but in the end, Han and Kira sort of slip up through into the airport, and then they make their way up to the teller, or wherever you would go normally to pay. It's really hard to say what to call these people. But yeah, so Han immediately walks up and flashes this blue glowing vial of the coaxium, and the lady just looks at him astonished. And it's hard to say why she didn't call the Imperial authorities immediately, because I would think she would get caught. It's hard to take something like that secretively. I mean, it's huge bucks. If she tried to spend that anywhere, she would be known instantly. So, I don't know. It's a risky business on her part for even letting them through. But, she takes it. Han slips it through her in the drop box. And as he's sliding through, the gate shuts on Kira, so she doesn't make it. And then Han's all sad and flipping out. And she's like, "Oh, I'll find you. I'll find you." And then, it sort of messes up Han from that point. That's his big love of his life sort of escaped from him. At that point, he didn't really know what to do. Han actually ended up enlisting in the Imperial authorities, believe it or not, which I feel, if most people haven't watched Solo, you would not know that. He wasn't aligned with the perspectives of the Imperials. He had his own mind, I would say, but he was just mostly looking to be a pilot and, I guess just unleash the anger, take out a bunch of anybody that could stand in his way, I guess. It's Han for you, he does his own thing. So Kira doesn't make it, sadly. We don't see what happens to her for a little bit. And Han was actually given his name, Han Solo, by an Imperial officer when he was signing up to be a pilot, because he didn't know what else to say. I mean, being a slave your whole life, you probably didn't have a last name. And so when he just hesitated, the Imperial officer was like, Han Solo. And so, I mean, it's very fitting. I mean, he was by himself at the time, no family, no nothing, couldn't come up with a name, so it works. And yeah, so this is where we get a flash to Han on the battlefield with the Imperials. He seems very conflicted, doesn't really know his place, and he stumbles upon these other soldiers or bounty hunters. I'm not really sure what they're called. They're actually pretending to be Imperial officers in disguise, and you learn their names are Beckett, Val, and Rio. And these 3 team members are I'm honestly not really sure what their mission was at the time on that planet wherever Han was fighting, but he interacts with them, and he Han's very nosy. He could tell that they were up to no good. He could tell they weren't actually Imperial officers, so he asked to join in on their crew, and they weren't having it at first. They didn't really know who he was, so I mean, I wouldn't let him in either. But Han proves his worth. He proves he is handy with the blaster. He tells them how he's the best pilot in the galaxy, and they won't regret this decision. And yeah, Han goes with it full throttle and hopes to find some sort of meaning in life, I would say. He doesn't really know what he's looking for, but he knows at this point that the Imperials are up to no good, and you got to get out of that situation. It's a brutal times. Sort of, the Imperials were taking anybody that would join. They were posing these huge videograms all around each city, saying how great it was to join the Imperial Academy and all the rewards and everything that you would get. And that's sort of how they sucked in Han, because he's about being loyal and getting his rewards. So that, I mean, it makes sense, and I don't blame him, but that's still a big decision that he made in his life. And then also after the introduction to Beckett and his crew, that's actually when Han gets to meet Chewie for the first time, because he is thrown into Imperial prison after he gets sort of caught conspiring, and when he gets tossed into this sort of dungeon pit thing, he thinks he's going to be attacked by monsters. You hear this big growling, and then this big fuzzy thing comes walking out of the shadows, and it's Chewie. And this is where they first meet, and it's pretty awesome. It's one of the good moments of the movie, and as you can see, Chewie's there over my shoulder, and that's not the current. I believe that would be A New Hope Chewie, so he doesn't have the bowcaster in a Solo, or he doesn't have that like the strap around him. But yeah, Chewie, he gets to meet Chewie for the first time. Chewie was actually planning on like tussling with him. He was planning on maybe even eating him, who knows, because that Wookiee had been down there for a while. And then as Chewie's choking out Han in the mud, all of a sudden Han speaks out the and whatever in the Wookiee voice, and Chewie's like, "Oh, you speak Wookiee too?" And Han's like, yes, just give me a chance. And then they devise this breakout plan, and it actually make it look like that Chewie is strangling Han, and then Chewie ends up just ripping out the pole that Han was chained to, and they end up escaping and somehow fending their way off from the Imperial forces, and Beckett and his crew are sort of about to take off, and they're actually in the air. At this point, they see Han chasing after their ship to catch up, and I don't really think Beckett wanted to wait for him, but that the movie wasn't going to let that slide, so we all knew Han was getting on that ship, and he is now part of the crew of mysterious rebels, or whatever you want to call them. And this is also where we get to learn Chewbacca's name. You sort of, well, first we can't forget the awkward shower scene between Chewie and Han. Han just doing the thing, minding his own business, and Chewie just creeps his way into the shower, and it's a cute little moment between best friends there. But I had to throw that in. And then the next shot, I believe, you get to see them both standing on the ship, and as they're flying to their next location, I believe is on a heist job on Vandor, is what Beckett had planned for them. You get to learn that what actually Chewbacca's name was, because Han had not learned it up to that point. And when he said his name was Chewbacca, Han's like, no, I'm gonna have to think of a shorter name. I'm not dealing with that. So that's classic Han. Just no regards for other people's feelings. Whatever Han wants to do. So yeah. So as they're on their way to Vandor, this is actually the score where they're gonna try to get more coaxium, and because they were hired, or Beckett reveals he was hired by the Crimson Dawn, which was one of the big crime syndicates at the time, and they were under heavy investigation for a while, and it's the dark, mysterious force just is all around this particular mob group, it seems, and as we'll find out later who's truly behind it. But first, Beckett reveals this man named Dryden Voss, who he's been directly working with, and who he was assigned this mission of to steal. I forget the exact weight of coaxium, but ended up being like 12 giant tubes or whatever, which enough money to fund a whole empire, pretty much. So this was a huge deal to not only the Crimson Dawn, not only to the Imperials, but also to the rebels or anybody opposing them, because they didn't want the bad guys to get their hands on it, obviously. So as we are seeing Beckett and his crew swooping in on this haul of coaxium, it's like on this big freight train type thing. They're flying over it in a helicopter, and I guess gonna attach it with some cables and try to just fly it away. They're encountered by this group called Enfys Nest, who at the time they think is a group of martyrs, or like another sort of crime syndicate group trying to steal their score out of the way. And they're not having it. They're fighting them off, and this isn't the first encounter from Beckett and Enfys Nest. They haven't been at it with each other for a while, apparently. Not really too sure why. Because as we learn towards the end of the movie, things aren't always what they seem. And yeah, it's a kind of a slow start. They are encountered by a few of the Imperial range troopers at first. They notice that someone's trying to take this coaxium, and the range troopers stand no chance. Beckett and his crew just pluck them off, but then Enfys Nest swoops in, and that's a little bit tougher because they have a little bit more of speeder bikes and higher technology, and do things a little bit off the books that maybe Imperials wouldn't, even though they're kind of shady as it is. So yeah, you see actually one of the crew members, Rio, this little monkey alien looking guy. He's got 4 arms. He's pretty cool. He actually ends up getting shot as they're trying to get away, and it's unfortunate demise for Rio. He doesn't get any of the score. As we know, doesn't really turn out to be that great anyways, so poor Rio doesn't make it out. And Val, who is actually Beckett's lover, wife, girlfriend, they don't really establish it, but they're most definitely together because they have a few different kissing scenes. So that is the only person Beckett actually trusts that he reveals to. He tells Han repeatedly over the movie not to trust anybody ever. And he thinks Han isn't listening, but Han, being the sassy guy he is, always is. So, as Han is trying to keep it together, him and Chewie are trying to hold off Enfys Nests while Beckett and is coordinating plans with Val. The plan was, Val was on this bridge, and she was supposed to blow it up before it reached, so then they could just take the last cart, wherever the coaxium was, and just fly away with it easily. but they were not predicting that Enfy's nest would be there, and Val didn't have enough time to get away, so she actually ended up sacrificing herself, which was another kind of a sad scene. You see Beckett sort of screaming there at the end, like, no, he just lost one of his, true best friends, and it's hard. Feel bad for the guy, and yeah, it's a big risk, and she did it for them. I mean, she knew what she was getting herself into. And then from that point, we see. Hold on, I got a full pages here. Blah, blah, blah. Oh yeah, that's right. As they did end up eventually escaping without Val and Rio, so it was just basically Han and Beckett escaping with the coaxium, and Han, he makes a huge blunder here. He does not think that they're going to make it in time with the coaxium because it's on a very time-sensitive mission, since it can only go up to a certain temperature, and he thinks it's going to blow up, and he is very selfish at times, and he did not want to sacrifice himself. So while Val and Rio already sacrificed themselves, Han is selfish, and he drops the coaxium that they have on board right as it's about to blow up. I mean, I guess it does technically save both their lives, but it is still a selfish moment. They should have at least attempted to complete the job, and for the ones that went down fighting. And that was not a very good moment for Han, in my opinion. It sort of shows his true nature a little bit. And yeah, Beckett is absolutely pissed. I don't know why he continued to work with him after that. I guess Han must be really such a good pilot after all. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of. The dude literally has messed up another man's life. I wouldn't be able to forgive that, so. Yeah, this heist job on Vandor went south pretty quickly. And, yeah, so then they have to go back and sort of tell this Dryden Voss, who is the Crimson Dawn leader at the time, and he doesn't really know what to say. Han thinks that, they shouldn't tell him, but Dryden knows that the only thing to do is to confront this man, because he's going to figure out either way. So they know they're in deep shit. They approach Dryden Voss, who somehow was pretty close to them. I was expecting them to have to travel to at least another planet or something. I didn't realize it was going to be so close. Might still be on Vandor? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So, yeah, we get to introduce to Dryden Voss, and this is where Kira, again, makes an appearance, and Han is stunned to see that his former lover is on the side of this big Crimson Dawn mob boss, and doesn't really know what to think at the time. He still has feelings for her, it's clear. He's looking at her with these big puppy eyes. Still very confused. But it's pretty clear that there's something going on between Kira and Dryden, whether they're married or she's one of, his lieutenants, or we'll figure that out more as the show goes on. So, yeah, Han's trying to keep it together, play it cool, doesn't know exactly the situation that's going on yet. Him and Chewie are sort of pounding some drinks at this luxurious gathering that Dryden is hosting. Not really sure what all these people are gathering or celebrating for. I guess it's just all one big party when you got money, so they have plenty of time and booze to have a good time. And yeah, so I guess from that point, you see Han being cheesy with Kira, trying to see, what have you been up to all these years? And he wants to get back with her, which is clear, and it's a complicated dynamic at this point. But there's much more important matters going on. They have to figure out a way to pay back Dryden Voss for all this coaxium that they did not produce for him. And this is the last straw, according to Dryden. He was not going to give them any more chances. Or at least Beckett's last chance, because this is the first time Han had even met him. But Beckett has been I guess, working and failed for him on a few different occasions at this point. So he's very uptight. I think part of why he was all over Han before, I guess he knew these big mob bosses aren't very forgiving. You can't mess up your few chances they give to you, or it's gonna be your head. So Han is all aboard this next plan. He promises to make it up to them. Says they've still got the best pilot in the world, and they got to try to pull off this next coaxium run at a much quicker rate because, then they don't have another chance. So it's do or die this time, and I believe this is the Kessel Run, the infamous Kessel Run that they have planned, that everybody sort of hears about in the original movies. You hear Han bragging about how he did the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. So that is this heist job that they have planned next, and it is on the planet Kessel, as I have just mentioned. It is sort of a toxic planet. Everybody that lives on there has to be wearing like masks and all sort of like respiratory devices, and it's uninhabitable, I would say. But it is a mining colony. Where they are mining coaxium, I believe, not sure what else, but that is one of the main resources at the time. And so that was one of Han's leads. He figured, I believe it was actually under control by like an alliance to the Crimson Dawn. And it was a big gamble that Dryden was taking, sending Han and Chewie and Beckett, because he knew that there was a chance that they could find out that it was Crimson Dawn that, ended up with the coaxium. But Han insisted that, oh no, this is the first time he's working for Dryden, so how could they know it was him? So Han insists everything will be okay, and they have a plan to, after they scoop up this coaxium on Kessel, they're going to bolt it to Savareen, which is a nearby planet, I guess, where they process the coaxium and refine it, so it will make it travelable at that point. But they still have to get it from Kessel to Savareen without it exploding. So they have to find a fast enough ship that can do the job. They don't really have one at this point. So they're in trouble. And Kira sort of has a few leads. She was actually assigned by Dryden, which ends up being the worst decision by Dryden, to put her with Han on the job to help make sure like everything goes smoothly. So I don't know what he was thinking. I mean, it's obvious that they had some sort of relationship in the past, and probably can't really trust her, because she's probably gonna turn to Han at some point. And yeah, I was pretty shocked when he made that decision, but not really too surprised at the same time, because I kind of wanted to see them, get back a little bit. And I mean, it's hard to make up lost time, but you could tell that they were sort of like soulmates and meant for each other, considering they grew up and didn't really know anybody else, and that was like they're best friends. So it's hard to replace that. And so as they're in search for the ship, Kira has a lead. I forget which planet they are scoping out at this point, but they come across this big sabacc event, which is like some sort of like card poker playing game that they have on this planet. And this is where we get introduced to a young Lando Calrissian, very suave and energetic guy, and he does not like to lose. He is very all in all the time, and he will not take a no for an answer. If you challenge him, he will step right up, and that's continuously what he did over the course of the movie. Han could read him like a book. He knew that his best chance at trying to find a ship was to try to con one off this Lando fellow who had the infamous Millennium Falcon at the time, and this was how Han ended up coming into possession of it. But he first has to win it in a game of sabacc, not once, but 2 different times. And the second time, he actually does eventually win it for good. And this first time, Lando is very bitter about parting with it. He actually joins in with them on their mission to make sure it sort of goes smoothly. He doesn't want to see the end of his baby girl, and it's hard to, you spend so much money on his and so much time into his ship that he didn't want to have it scratched or really anything bad happen to it. Whenever they would get shot at, he would always be freaking out, and you would see him cringe and start like jumping up in his chair. It's pretty funny. It's definitely a different Lando than we get to see in the later movies. He's not really too much of a badass at this point. He's just all about making dough and flying his fancy ship. And he does his own thing, just likes to gamble. And Lando, I can't believe I completely forgot. Lando actually does end up winning that first game of Sabacc because he cheats and pulls out a fake card. And that's how, and Han could tell instantly, and he chases him out to his ship and calls him out on it. So, as Lando's being called out on that, he knows he can't really escape Han now and sort of has to, not really make up to him, but help him out in some sort of way. I mean, they have some sort of similar interests. They're both not really a fan of, Imperials or any sort of crime syndicate bosses in general. So, Lando is sort of on board with this plan, wants to help them out a little bit, but mostly he just wants to make sure his ship's intact, is what I could pretty much come up with, and yeah. Oh, and another little cool note that we found out over the Solo movie is if anybody has watched the Clone Wars, there's a character called Aura Singh, and I guess Beckett is the one who actually is who killed her, which was kind of devastating for me because I do not like to hear about any of my fellow Jedi being massacred, so that was a little bit of a hit. Not really a fan of Beckett after I heard that, and but apparently Lando also owed Aura Singh money, and so maybe she wasn't too clean, but not everybody is. Not every Jedi could be either. So, and then we also get to see this as they get on board the Falcon. You see this weird relationship between Lando and his droid, which I believe the droid's name is L337. Very, very odd. It has very human characteristics, like the way they talk to each other would be like how any humans would interact. Like the droid can pick up on feelings very well and jokes and different sort of like expressions. So it's almost like they have like a relationship, like they flirt with each other at times. It's very, very strange. Like I don't know why they felt they needed to include that in the movie, but they did, and I don't know. I guess it's also nice to see the droids have some sort of actual personality rather than just being all robotic all the time. But, it's still a little odd. The droid actually thinks at one point that Lando is, like, in love with the droid. And the droid's like, oh, yeah, I'm not interested back. And I thought that was really funny. So, if anything, I would expect the droid to be in love with its owner. But, guess not. This droid has a mind of its own. And, so as we get to see that relationship unfold, the whole Kira and Han relationship is unfolding even more. They're starting to spend a little more time together, get even more and more close. Han continues to relay to her that he wants to know everything that happened to her since they've been separated. And they have a little make-out scene in Lando's cape room as Kira's trying on one of many of Lando's capes. He probably has over 100. The dude's a sick savage for the capes. He probably has every color in the books. Very suave guy, that Lando. So, yeah. Let me get my other notes here. Yeah, so definitely It's hard to picture at this point what's going to ultimately happen with Kira and Han. You can tell they want to be together, but Kira has these obligations to Dryden Voss and doesn't want to really let him down because then she knows she'll be wanted, or if Han and Kira run off and they're both wanted. So it's sort of a lose-lose situation for them in either situation. Yeah, so we get back to Kessel at this where they're arriving on Kessel for the Kessel Run, and Han and Chewie are chained up, and I guess the plan was to have them act as prisoners, and Beckett and Kira would act like they were going to be slaves and trade them for coaxium. It was obviously going to be more than just those two. They had to, say it was a small little sample, I believe, in order to get the amount of coaxium they were looking for. So they ended up bartering with Han and Chewie, and Han's looking back at Kira like, is this a good plan? I did not expect this. And Han's a little bit, unsure at this moment. Doesn't know what Kira's true intents are, I would say. But then they all sort of get separated. Han and Chewie are taken into a little holding area, and Kira and Beckett followed this weird guy in a mask who's breathing gas. I don't even know what to call him. And I guess as they're waiting for the head of Kessel or whoever is running the mining colony to come, they're waiting, and they're all split up. So Han and Chewie take down the guards in their holding area, and then Kira and Beckett take out all the people that are surrounding them. And this is sort of where things spiral out of control from here. Pretty much is the Battle of Kessel, if you want to call it. Sort of everybody's running all over the place, trying to secure this coaxium. I mean, they basically know that's what they're there for at this point. And Han and Chewie are all in. They're making their way as fast as they can to locate the coaxium in the mine. And they actually do get separated at one point because Chewie runs into another Wookiee that was being enslaved, and he wants to help out his own kind. And it looks like for a point that it was going to be the departure of Chewie and Han. They were never going to develop that relationship, and there was a little bit of a anxious moment there, I would say. But I mean, we've seen all these old movies, so we know what happens. So it's not too big of a deal. But for a second, we did think that Chewie was going to disappear on Han, and it's not really how a great friendship starts off. So Han ends up stumbling upon a cart of the coaxium. There's bullets flying everywhere. So Han's trying to keep this a low profile at the same time while trying to sneak out with the coaxium. Beckett is all over the place trying to, defend as much as he can. Kira, not too much of a fighter, but she does sort of, as they're escaping there at the end, she kind of gets in her little blast and detonates either some C4 or some sort of explosive, and that's how they end up making their escape there at the end. And Lando is probably the saddest one out of all, because he gets to see the demise of his beloved L3 droid, and he literally reacts like you would see a human being dying. His droid gets shot up, and as it's lying there in the middle of the battlefield, Lando just sprints in and tries to go after him and save him, and it's a touching moment. Even though it is a droid, you could tell that it's very devastating for Lando, and you do kind of feel bad for him, even though it is just a hunk of metal. But so once we think that relationship well, that relationship does come to an end, but Chewie returns, so, it balances out a little bit. Han gets his buddy back, Lando loses a buddy, so, it's better. I'd take Chewie over a droid any day, so. Yeah, as they're escaping, Kira got off the final blast, and they eventually are able to get the Falcon off ground, and they immediately stumble into an Imperial blockade. And you don't get to see this guy behind me, the big Darth Lord, because he is Darth Vader at this point, but he's still a young Darth. And plus also this doesn't really involve, the Emperor and his apprentice. It's mostly centered around, the crime syndicates, but the Imperials are going to do whatever they can to try and stop Han and his crew from escaping Kessel with this coaxium, because they want to use it for themselves. It's either someone's credit, and they're making a lot of credit off of it, or they're using it as a weapon. So that's pretty much what the Empire's intent is for, and they set up a huge blockade in space. This is, I think, the first time we get to see a huge Star Destroyer, probably one of the first Star Destroyers that were built, because the Empire had just launched at this point where they just started transitioning from, the clone troopers, and now they're the stormtroopers, and, they're the Galactic Empire now instead of the Republic, so it's a pretty big transition. You get to see this pretty deathly looking Star Destroyer in the clouds with like lightning going behind it. Pretty cool shot, actually. And they are, not expecting much to happen at first. Han's like, oh yeah, they're not going to send one or two TIEs after, this tiny little freighter. And little do they know, here comes a whole fleet of TIEs chasing after them, and they have to figure out a way to escape. And the only way that Han can think of, and plus they're holding all this coaxium, so they have to be time sensitive too. They had to go through this, not like black hole, but some sort of loop thing. They called it like a maelstrom, like I forget the term, like some sort of like shortcut that went through this like sort of space storm tornado type thing, and there was very, very, very low chances of survival. But since it was literally their only option, or else they were going to die anyway, and the coaxium was going to blow up. So Han had to make this shortcut, and for very big risk, they fend off a few TIEs. Like some of the TIEs get crushed in the inclement weather. Oh yeah, and another big thing to mention, because also while they're going through, they don't really have much visibility, and so they usually, Lando, when he was on the Falcon, would rely on L3's navigation, but because L3 got murked, now they gotta use L3's processor to install on the Falcon, so they end up taking it out of L3 and putting it back in the Falcon. And Lando was actually very happy about that, because now it's like L3 is permanently in the ship and always with him now, like, so it's not just a droid, it's has a little bit more importance now, I guess you could say. So I guess Lando's a little bit happier now. It sort of offsets that loss. And so as they're going through this giant space tornado storm, they encounter a giant octopus type creature. I wish I had a better name for it. And they think they're doomed. And this is a massive, massive, massive space creature. And there's really no way to avoid it. And luckily for them, it just happened to be that they were also very close to what they call a maw. They spell it M-A-W, which was kind of like this big, this is what I would describe more as a black hole. This was sucking up everything in sight. And so Han somehow tricks this big space creature into going near the vortex. He launches the escape pod, and tricks the creature into thinking that that was their ship. And so the creature follows it towards the maw, and it was like this big red looking tornado thing. I wish I had some visuals. It doesn't do justice my descriptions, but yeah, they risky move because they almost got sucked into it as well. Beckett ended up using one tube of the coaxium to have to put in the fuel tank because it was the only thing powerful enough that would launch them out of the maw without getting sucked into it. So at the last second, he gets that filled in, and they ended up thrusting out of it right before they're all about to perish, and, they narrowly escape. We all know they weren't going down, so that it wasn't going to happen that way. And, so they arrive on Savareen this time, and they have completed the Kessel Run in 12 seconds. Han is bragging and all, like, pumping his chest. And, but they still have to get this refined immediately, or else it's still going to blow up. So they're urgent to these Savareen natives to help them out, and this is again where Kira reminds Han that she still owes Dryden, and she wants to go with Han because they just had this big score. So they want to be able to take what they can and, go off. Like they had originally planned at the beginning of the movie to take the loot and, start their own life, buy a ship, and get away together. And Han repeatedly mentions that over the course of the movie that he would still enjoy that. And Kira, conflicted with her loyalties to Dryden, and doesn't know what to do at this point. She knows that it's coming to an end in time to make a decision. So it's hard to say what's really going to happen between these two lovers. In a good movie they would have stayed together, but that didn't happen, unfortunately. But before that, hold on. Yeah, so Kira is adamant that, it wouldn't work out even if they took their share of this coaxium and ended up running off, that Dryden would just find them and hunt them down. So they can't do it. So as they're on Savareen trying to figure out a plan, they get approached by Enfys Nest again, and they're ready for an all-out war this time because there's nowhere to go. Coaxium ain't going anywhere. It's just sitting out in the open. So, they have to make a decision. It's either fight or, work it out. And this is actually where we get to see that Enfys Nest is not who we thought they were. I guess if Beckett just, chilled out a little bit and maybe listened to somebody for once and heard their side of the story, you would learn that Enfys Nest is also a group of rebels, and they are, against the Imperials getting their hands on this coaxium. So they want to do everything they can to avoid that from happening, which is why they were also fighting back against Beckett, because they didn't know his intentions, or because he was also hired by the Crimson Dawn, and Enfys Nest didn't want the Crimson Dawn to get their hands on it. So, you can see why they were being attacked and how, they weren't really friends at first, but now enemies become friends, and it's cool to see, them put their differences beside. And I guess they had a little bit of help from the natives on Savareen too. I guess they were supportive of Enfys Nest and sort of like vouched for them, because they were, when it came time to sort of taking out these Crimson Dawn guards, they were helping out and immediately, didn't want to see the wrong people get their hands on this coaxium. So yeah, so Enfys Nest and Beckett and Han, and they become allies now. And so let's see here. So, the Enfys Nest. Beckett is a loyal dude. He is not loyal, but he is loyal to the money. Whatever he can do to get his next paycheck, that's all he cares about. And once, I guess Han was the one who sort of made the decision. We're not giving this coaxium to Crimson Dawn anymore, because after they sort of introduced Enfys Nest, they realized that Han and Enfys Nest kind of formed this allegiance, even though without Beckett really approving it. So he was not having it. He feels conflicted between his friendship with Han and whether or not he should give up Han and go against him and, still fill his duty to the Crimson Dawn. So he ends up holding up Han and thinking and taking what he thought was the coaxium. So Han and Chewie are up the creek at this point. They are being sort of held up by Beckett. It's, I don't know. It's very, very strange movie, the relationships that they all have with each other. Once Dryden tells Han, first they have to go back and tell Dryden about the whole plan and, what's truly unfolded. And that was not going to happen in Beckett's eyes, so he had to figure out some sort of way to still make the plan unfold the way he wanted it to go. So when they arrive back at Beckett's palace, Kira immediately gets all tense, and, Dryden can tell that not everything went smoothly, that he actually had spies or informants, and he knew everything all along, so he didn't believe the lies. Han and Chewie then are sort of in a tight position because Beckett has turned on them and they don't really know what Kira is going to do in this situation. It's sort of the balls are all in her court. Dryden is sort of telling Han to open up the coaxium because he wants to make sure that they actually brought what he was expecting. But, Han being all slick, he actually ended up leaving, or what he thought was leaving the real coaxium back with Enfys Nest. And the plan was to have the fake coaxium when he was to give it to Dryden. But he had planned ahead for that because he thought that maybe, Beckett might actually deceive him, because throughout the whole movie, Beckett kept telling him, don't trust anyone. So he's like, all right, I'm not going to trust you either. So he knew that Beckett was probably going to try to pull a smooth one on him. So instead of leaving the real coaxium with Beckett, he actually took the real coaxium to Dryden, which is very, very risky, because Dryden was so close to actually getting the coaxium. And it doesn't end up happening. There's sort of like this cool fight scene. You get to see the Crimson Dawn blades that Dryden has. Kira betrays Dryden, finally, which I feel like we sort of all saw coming. And and then from that point, it's sort of weird at this time because Han wants to stay with Kira and go off with her, because now that they have this coaxium, they can do whatever they want. But he is more focused on taking and finding Chewie, and they formed a strong relationship, so it's hard not to. And he tells Kira to sort of wait for him, and he doesn't really say she will. It's strange. Han sort of walks away, and you don't know if they're really ever going to see each other again. They sort of feel like they are going to, but I feel like their hearts probably tell them no. And this is when we get to see Kira show her true colors after all. She ends up, even though she was the one who killed Dryden, she ends up being the leader of Crimson Dawn in the end, because she, as Han departs the building, you see Kira bring up a hologram video call with a familiar foe who most people probably stunned to see make an appearance, and that would be none other than the Sith Lord Darth Maul himself right here. And he is informed by Kira, that Dryden Voss is dead. And so this instantly makes Kira the head of the Crimson Dawn, well, just below Maul. And at this point, this is between episodes 3 and 4, so at this point, Maul is no longer a Sith apprentice to Palpatine, because Palpatine thinks he was defeated. And as we saw in Phantom Menace, but then he makes a return and was saved by the Night Brothers and Night Sisters, which we saw in Clone Wars. So Maul is not truly dead, and he is the leader of the Crimson Dawn, truly behind this whole ordeal, and he summons Kira to come to him on Dathomir, which is a pretty much like Mars-like planet. It's, red everywhere, and like sand, and pretty much uninhabitable, very, very hot. They do have, I forget, was it, if anybody wants to chime in on the chat, I forget the name of the race of Maul's people. I'm just drawing a huge blank right now. If anybody can chime in, that would be wonderful. But that was definitely like an oh shit moment for me when Maul popped up on the hologram, because he's probably one of my favorite characters from all the movies. So it was cool to see them sort of incorporate him there a little bit. I wish we could see more of his influence over the whole crime league, and how, because there's tons of different crime syndicates at this point, and it would be nice to see them competing with each other, and how those sort of dynamics unfold. But I mean, maybe they'll come out with a show or something. You never know what Star Wars is going to be doing. So as Maul summons Kira to Dathomir, that is the last we see of her. Then she sort of jets off, and Han gets to watch her fly away, and knows now this is definitely going to be the last time that he ever saw her. So he's sort of devastated. But he has a bigger mission. He wants to go save his new friend Chewbacca, and he wants to make sure that this coaxium gets into the proper hands of Enfys Nest, and someone who's going to make proper use of it, and not have it in Imperial hands or have it in a crime mob's hands. So it comes back to Savareen, where Beckett is holding up Chewbacca. The scum Beckett, he can't be loyal to anybody. That dude deserves what he has coming to him. Han treats him too well at the end, I thought. Even when he shot him down at the end, you could see Han holding his hand and trying to not comfort him, so to say, but he got more than he deserved. So. Yeah, definitely Beckett is sort of scummy. Kira is scummy, pretty much you sort of get why Han was all about himself. Nobody was really straight with him or honest with him ever. He was always on his own. Had to just, take care of himself. Even Lando bailed on him at the end there. He flew off in the Falcon, and didn't want any part of Han. So there's some shitty relationships he seems to get himself in, except for with Chewbacca. He seems to have found a new reliable companion, which was nice, and they need each other. And we also find out in this movie, I believe, Chewbacca says to Han that he is 190 years old, which is crazy to me. So, Yoda's species isn't the only one that gets to live crazy long, so these Wookiees get to be pretty old as well, which I thought was really cool. So, yeah. And after Han gives the coaxium to Enfys Nest, it's a female, actually, because she takes off her helmet at the end, and she invites Han to be a part of them and sort of join their little rebel band, I guess you would call it. I don't know if this was the start, maybe, of a different rebel alliance. I don't know if it ever verged with the alliance that we all know, but it was definitely the start of something. So, so Han and Chewie, we sort of, the last thing they do is return to the planet where they met Lando, and he is involved in another sabacc battle, as always. Lando, won't pass up a penny. And does he even do what does he do for work? That's my other question. Like, what does Lando do besides play sabacc? If anybody knows, please chime in. So yeah, if they go back and see Lando playing sabacc again, and Han wants a rematch, and this time the final rematch is to acquire the Millennium Falcon for good. And because Han, after completing this Kessel Run in 12 parsecs, he thinks that he's destined to be with this hunk of metal for good, and that's what he sort of relays to Lando. Lando doesn't want to part with it because it's his pride and joy, and he's sort of, it's I don't know, they turn out to be friends, I would say, at the end, even though Han doesn't really give Lando reasons to stick around. It was just a giant headache for Lando the whole time. Like, he lost his droid, his ship got banged up. He never even got any coaxium, because I think the only Han only ended up getting like a tiny little tube for his troubles. But he didn't really care about that at the end. He was more about doing the right thing, which was a little bit surprising for Han. I mean, but I guess everybody can be redeemed, so. Yeah, they beat Lando, or Han, not Han and Chewie, just Han beats Lando in the game of sabacc. He wins the Falcon for good, and I guess the sort of end shot is you kind of see Han and Chewie sort of like flying away in space, and that's how Solo's story really comes to an end. The two good buddies going off. I believe. At one point, Beckett mentions that he had a mission that he was given by the Crimson Dawn to go to Tatooine for the next heist. And the mission was from a big gangster, and I happen to believe that gangster was probably Jabba the Hutt, and that's how Han got his job for the next movies, and how he started working and becoming this big, bounty hunter, or not bounty hunter, an outlaw, and he was a smuggler, and I'm pretty sure this is where he met Jabba, or Beckett was the one who told him about Jabba, and not Jabba specifically, but this big gangster, and to go to Tatooine, and, he'll find his riches there, and so that's where Han and Chewie end up going at the end of the movie, and that's where, that's where the two companions are taken off to, and with that, brings us to the end of Solo, a Star Wars story. Going to take a quick 5-minute intermission here, and then I will be back with the Bad Batch, Episode 2, Cut and Run. Be back in 5. Alrighty, everyone, we are back live here in the Plate of the Plants basement at Nahant, Massachusetts. The lovely Zach Peters is on vacation this week, so we will not have him back. Hopefully, maybe next Tuesday he'll return for Star Wars Kid. But he will not be here this evening, as you guys all know, or he will not be here Thursday or Sunday for the events that we have going on this week. So, yeah. Hope Zach's having a good time in Florida with the rents. And, yeah, we got episode 2 of Bad Batch here now for you guys. This episode was titled Cut and Run. And before I do that, I'm going to start off with the ceremonial rip. You can see Grogu's a little jealous behind me there. You know he wants a hit. Oh, don't mind my coughing. So attractive. Okay. Alright, so a little bit of a quick overview from the first episode. So we are introduced to the Bad Batch crew. So we have Hunter, Crosshair, Echo, and Wrecker are the main crew, and they are a defective group of Clone Force 99. They were made by the Kaminoan cloners. And they were, I guess, designed on purpose to be defective and sort of have they each have their own individual, strengths. And, but they're also programmed to go against orders, sorry. So, they're sort of not the typical clone. They call, the generic clones regs, which I find is pretty funny. And those types of clones are traditional. They always follow their protocol and programming and never disobey an order. But these clones and Clone Force 99 or the Bad Batch, whichever you prefer, they have their own set of rules. I would say they don't really follow anybody. They are still part of the Republic, I would say, and when the whole Order 66 happened, they were very, very confused, as we saw in the first episode. They didn't really know what to do. And Crosshair was still sort of programmed to follow orders, but he was also still a defective clone, technically. He was sort of a mix of, I would say, a reg and a defective droid. I mean, not droid, a clone, sorry. So, yeah, it's pretty chaotic at this point. All the Jedi are pretty much being massacred across the galaxy, and the Bad Batch don't really understand why. I mean, they know why, but they don't really get it, because these Jedi were fighting by them for generations, and now all of a sudden they're, getting murked off, and it's tough. So we get to know a little. We get to see, because in Clone Wars they do introduce the Bad Batch, but you don't really get to know about them as much as you do in this show. You get to sort of see the personalities of. Oh, I forgot to mention Tech before too, but yeah, you get to mention hear all the personalities of the different characters and their different skill sets and how they're all pretty much vital and integral to each other, because they complement each other very well with what they can do, and they work well as a team. So yeah, in the first episode, Crosshair's programming gets the best of him. He actually is reprogrammed by Tarkin, and he is intensified programming, so now he follows orders even more, and now he's trying to hunt down his old buddies, which is something that's, I think, tough for them to handle right now because, it's their dude. Like they've been fighting along him and trusting him this whole time, and now all of a sudden he's shooting at them, and it's hard, They don't know where he's gonna end up. They hope he comes back to them, I would say. I hope he does too, because Crosshair is critical to them, to their success, I would say. And yeah. Oh, before I even continue, I wanted to get the phone cam out here. I didn't have them in time for last week's episode, but I had these Bad Batch Black Series on order here that just arrived a few days ago. So let me get my phone cam out on here. Yay. Not the best quality. No, that's actually pretty good. Yeah, there you go. I have Rucker on back order still. Or pre-order. I'm sorry, I'm really stoned at the moment. Yeah, but we have Hunter and Crosshair. These are some dope figures in my opinion. Yeah, these just came out a few months ago. Starting to be more in stock recently, but they just had that May the 4th sale because of Star Wars, so I think they might be sold out in most places right now. I know they're sold out on GameStop because they were doing a pretty nice sale for a while. That's where I scooped these, and yeah, I definitely recommend if you can get your hands on them, get them as soon as possible, because I could see these soaring in price pretty soon. The clones in general are my favorites, and most people seem to agree, and I don't know, they're just cool, like all these helmets. Oh yeah, that's a good close-up there. Even Crosshair. And I heard they're releasing an Omega too, as well. They just announced on the Black Series pipeline, so they're always pumping out figures. I think they said their production is like 16 months from whenever they announce it, so we got some time for that one. But yeah, it's always exciting, always new things coming out in the world of Star Wars. I think we still got like 14 episodes after this one, so lots of good stuff going on. So pretty much haven't even started the episode yet. We start off and so we were introduced to this character Omega last episode, who was a medical assistant to one of the Kaminoan cloners, and we were revealed that she is part of the Bad Batch herself. She has some sort of secret skill we don't know yet of, but which we'll probably find out soon, I'm hoping. And she was very fascinated from the get-go by, Hunter and the whole crew. Hunter in particular, she seems very attached to. They have a very interesting, and that's the touching, I would say touching, to see, Hunter sort of act, or have some sort of, father-like quality, even though he struggles to. You can see he wants to help her out and try to be there for her because she doesn't really have anybody else. And, yeah, when they're leaving Kamino in that last episode, she decided to join with them and wanted to be part of Hunter's team, which I thought was a nice little moment there for them. So, yeah, we were introduced to Omega, and she, I would say she's maybe about 10 years old. It's hard to say, but she's a little girl. The last episode and this episode start with her still fascinated by the whole idea of space, and this is the first time on a spaceship. So the episode starts with her. She was knocked off in the corner of the ship and all tuckered out, or whatever. I forget what the exact phrase they said for her, but yeah, she was having a ball, seeing the world for the first time, and they arrive on a planet called Salu Kamai, where they were planning on meeting a contact that Tech knew of, I guess. And I guess Hunter knew of it as well. And So they arrive on Salukama, and Omega's instantly fascinated by all the dirt. She's never seen anything like it before. She's throwing it up in the air like it's snow, and everybody's looking at her like a complete maniac and thinking she's like the oddball out. Which, I mean, she was at the time, but I mean, anybody would be reacting that way if you were sheltered for your whole life and never got to experience anything. So it's understandable. I don't blame her. So she, is trying to, at the same time of having fun, she knows she has to be serious too because they're on an important mission. She can't jeopardize it. So she tries to keep her cool. They arrive, or not actually first, Wrecker being all hot-headed, and he's running around, and he notices like a booby trap, or I guess he gets caught in the booby trap, but he gets tempted by something, I forget what it was, and he springs a booby trap, and that's where we get to meet these two new characters, who actually turned up being the contact, so it didn't end up being a bad thing. It was an ex-clone named Cut and his, I believe it's his Twi'lek wife named Sue. So he was a deserter for years. He hadn't been part of the clone army. He deserted and, got married. He has a family with 2 kids, which I thought was really cool. But they sort of showed what their life was like outside of, the generic clone troopers, and not every clone is meant to serve that purpose. They can still have a life and choose their own path. So I thought that was nice to see. And they were obviously friends of the Bad Batch, and we also get informed by Cut that he had contact with Captain Rex like the day before, which was a huge moment because Captain Rex is probably one of everybody's, or if you're into the Clone Wars series and that whole era, all about Captain Rex. You're probably one of your favorite characters. His Hot Toys and Black Series figures, everything Captain Rex is all hot and sells out immediately. You want to get your hands on them if you see them and don't let go. So yeah, those are very valuable at the moment. I don't even want to know the going rates, so we won't even begin to look into that. So we were introduced to Cut and Sue, informs them that he had contact with Captain Rex about a day before, and that Rex was going on and on about the behavioral implants in the clones. So he is very fully aware of what's going on as well. And so this is another sign that maybe Rex could be coming up soon. I really hope that they start incorporating him into the show, because there's no clone show better without Captain Rex. So that was probably, we were all, I would say most fans were hoping maybe that this was the episode we would find who the contact was. And when we heard it was Cut and Sue, it was a little disappointing. But still, it was nice to know what was actually going on with Cut since he deserted. Everybody has to have some sort of story. As we all know, they do a great job of giving everybody a background in Star Wars. So hopefully next week we get to see Rex. While the adults are having their conversation, Omega is outside playing with Cut and Sue's kids. I believe their names were Jack and Shia, or Shahi. I don't know if I'm saying that properly, but So, a couple cute little kids running around. They're throwing the soccer ball or football, I forgot which one it was, and the ball actually ends up going a fence into this out of bounds zone where they're not really supposed to be going, and Jack and Shia tell Omega, no, don't go over there and get it, and of course she's, doesn't have experience with these situations. So she went anyway and encounters this four-eyed wolf or like some sort of like beast-like creature, and yeah, that's not a good sign for Omega. So yeah, the adults have to immediately come running out, and Hunter is trying to fend off the creature with his blade, and Sue jumps on top of a building. Pretty badass. She's a pretty good shot with a sniper rifle and starts shooting at the creature with the blasters. And Clement or Omega, I don't know. I keep saying Clementine because that's the dog that lives in this. But yeah, Omega is saved, and they weren't gonna let a little child die, so that would be horrifying. Omega gets pretty much scolded by Hunter, and it's not the best parenting techniques there. I mean, obviously Hunter's a clone. That's not what he was designed to be doing. I mean, he was programmed out, even though they do follow their own set of rules. In the end, he is a clone and was programmed to do something at the end of the day. So, you know, it's tough for him to know how to truly be a parent. So he sort of just has that soldier's mentality and was harsh on her, and you know, she takes it the wrong way, and Cut sort of instantly like hugs her and tries to console her and make her feel better, and says if that's not how you're supposed to be treating a child, and you gotta, you know, sort of, he didn't say it directly, but saying you gotta be more compassionate, and you know, use like, you gotta be gentle with kids and not get in their face all the time when they make a mistake. And yeah, so we also after that get to learn that Cut and Sue want off of this planet Saleucami because the Imperials are starting to slowly gain more and more power, and they are afraid that soon they won't even be able to get off at all. And I guess they developed this new system. It literally just happened as soon as the Bad Batch got on the planet. It was like a set of chain codes is what they called it. Every passenger, every ship, everything needed to have a sort of a code or bar tag on it to get through the Imperial security, and there's set protocols like wherever you would go. So the times were changing, and you know, the Imperial and Galactic Empire insisted that the war was over and it was free times, but it was so clear that it couldn't be more far from the truth. So yeah, it's a very chaotic time in the Empire. So as they're trying to get off the ship, or they're trying to get off the planet, this new protocol was implemented. So they are trying to figure out a way to get these fake chain codes, because obviously they can't, because Cut was a former deserter clone, so he can't reveal himself to anybody. So Tech and Echo were assigned the duty of trying to go track down some codes, and while they're doing that, they completely forget that Omega was hiding out on the ship because after she was scolded by Hunter because she was feeling badly, and so she ends up going on a little joyride with them, and yeah, that was not great. I guess she did ultimately help out in the end, but that did not go according to plan, to at least how Echo and Tech wanted it. And I feel like she kind of wanted to make up. She feel like she did something wrong with the whole ball situation, even though she really didn't, and it was just Hunter that made her feel bad. I feel like she wanted to make up and try to help out, and she asks if she can do anything for them, and Echo sort of like shoots her down, and I feel just really bad for the kid, because you know, she's young and all she wants to do is her best, and you know, it's not her fault all the time when things don't go wrong or don't go right. So I mean, I feel like they should have let her do something, or at least, you know, support her more. But there's just another example how they're just clones and they don't know what they're really supposed to be doing. But then on the other end, you see Cut and Sue. They adapted very well. I mean, Sue was never a clone; she was a Twi'lek, so that's completely different. But Cut adapted, and I mean, it probably took him time, but see, they can change. So while Tech and Echo and now Omega are trying to figure out how to get the codes, Tech has a brilliant plan of getting their own ship impounded by the Imperial government. So, 'cause I guess that was the quickest way to get near the codes, because they knew they just stored them in a disk safe somewhere in like one of their security rooms. So they get the ship impounded, they hide and then pretend there's nobody on board. The regular clone troopers think it was deserted. So as soon as they leave the ship, Tech, Echo, and Omega pop out of the ceiling, and they make their way into the control security room or whatever, and they steal the security discs. But then they have a little bit of a dilemma. While they're trying to get out, they see a whole battalion on their way back, and they're like, oh crap, we don't have enough time, and they sort of just gotta take they were going to transmit them, but now they don't have enough time. So now they just have to physically take the discs to Cut and Sue's family. And, it's very tight. They have this big battalion on their ass. And Tech and Echo are freaking out. They don't think they can pull it off. And they turn around and Omega's disappeared with the discs. And like, oh, shit. And Omega is putting it on herself to pretty much be the hero. And everybody's freaking out. They tell Cut and Sue, like, yeah, Omega has the discs. And like, great. And then Cut's freaking out. He almost walks through without the codes. And then at the last second, Omega pops up and saves the day at the end. So she did come through, but it was very, very, very tight call. And so yeah, we got Oh yeah, at one point there was a droid on board of the Imperial ship that when Omega was trying to sneak away with the discs. It was like one of those R2 units, the same style as R2-D2, and Omega bumps into it and it starts wailing like uncontrollably. It was so obnoxious. If anybody remembers that wailing, like I don't remember a droid sounding like that. That was kind of weird. But yeah, it literally started screeching, and then Wrecker comes out of nowhere and just bashes it. Classic Wrecker. Just that's all he's good for is physical violence. So. Leave the brains up to somebody else, I guess. So, Wrecker bashes it out and claps a few clone troopers. Hunter urges Cut to be patient and knows Omega will come through, and I don't know, he definitely feels really bad about how he treated her and wants to give her this other chance, and yeah, he's starting to regret. And I realize that, he has to adapt, and if he wants Omega to be part of his life, he's going to have to make changes as well. So, yeah, Omega comes through at the end of the day, and as they're about to leave and turn around, Hunter nudges her with Cut and Sue's family and says that she's going with them, and she is, shocked. And she does not know what to say, and she wants to stay badly with Hunter. They've formed some sort of bond at this point, you can definitely say, and like a daughter-father relationship, and Hunter doesn't really know what to do, and so the only thing he can think of is just push her off on this other family, and it was the wrong decision. It was not like what I would do or most people would do, probably. I mean, you don't just get rid of somebody because they're, a lot to deal with. You try to make it work. So yeah, he sort of pushes Omega off with Cut and Sue's family, even though it would probably be the best for Omega. That's not what she wanted, and she made that very clear, but Hunter walks away from her, and it's a sad little moment. That's how I was expecting the episode to end. Then there was as Hunter was arriving back from the landing platform, it was not going to go smoothly. They still had to escape. The Imperials were onto them by now. They barely got the chain codes in time, and right as Cut and Sue's family escaped, they realized that the codes were stolen, and Cut almost got caught too. I believe one of the clones was being like, "You look familiar," and Cut's like, "No, I don't." And then I think the other clone just got sidetracked, and that's the only way Cut really got away. So yeah, the shootout landing platform, and as they're about to run off and escape, Omega comes sprinting back and doesn't want them to leave without her, which was great for me, because I don't know, it would be too soon if they got rid of Omega after one episode. So I would have had a lot of criticisms to say, I guess, if she didn't end up back with them at the end of that episode. So yeah, that's pretty much the end of that one. It ends with, they ended back up on the ship, and Hunter and Omega have their little scene, and Hunter admits that he was wrong and still has a lot to learn. And, they both sort of say that they'll, be better and try to, make the right decisions. And that's where we sort of get the end of the episode. Not really sure where they were headed to next, to be honest with you. But yeah, I believe the next episode should be out on Friday, and we will have another Bad Batch review next Tuesday. But that will conclude it for this week's episode. I will take one more ceremonial rip, and then we will call it a evening. Cheers. May the Force be with you all.